which is basic things such as clean drinking water, big one. Thousands and thousands of people, children and otherwise, die every single day on the mainly in these poverty-stricken countries because they haven't got clean drinking water. Now, there's plenty of money in the world. You know, you've got, you know, top actors and actresses being paid millions for films that they do. Yeah, okay, that is what it is. But do they need millions? Footballers, top of their game, earning hundreds of thousands a week. Really? For kicking a football? Now, the reason that these things happen is because football, for instance, is one of the most loved, biggest financial sports out there. And us, as humans, we're the ones that have caused it to grow so exponentially. But should there not be a cap on how much they're paid? Why is this money? You know what? Who needs hundreds of £1,000s a week? I mean, all of us would be like, yeah, that'd be great. You know, nobody would say no. But the fact and the moral of it is that if they were paid or capped, say £10,000 a week, that's 40,000 a month. Who wouldn't be able to have an awesome life on that in today's market? You know, 40,000. That's just over the UK's average salary a year, and they get it a month. So for me, you know, there's a lot of things with the money that we have in this world that is used in some crazy ways, and there's people dying. You know, is it not the duty of all humans that are able to ensure that doesn't happen? Now, I know that certain celebrities and that, and, you know, royals, they give charitable aid and stuff like that, and that's great. It's brilliant. You know, and when it comes down to sort of lower middle class people that don't necessarily have the money to be able to chuck thousands or millions into a charity, you know, we give £1 or £5 or £10 to different charitable things that mean something more to us than any of the others. But, you know, we can only give so much. You know, if we were to give to every charity at £1, one British pound, a month for every single charity that exists, would be about £1 million in debt every month. You know, it's just not feasible. But there are ways that it could be. I've worked out in my book a very, very easy matrix calculation where if before tax we were, depending on obviously a salary structure, you know, a minimum, and then obviously it increases as it gets higher. But a very, very simple matrix where 0.01% of your salary each month was put into a charitable pot, a worldwide global humanity, you know, pot for poverty. Now, you're thinking, oh my God, you know that. But if everyone did it, wouldn't that be, you know, nobody likes paying tax, but if that was to become a law, it would probably be the one that you wouldn't care about the most because it was doing good rather than being negative thoughts in terms of, the government are just getting a wage increase or whatever. But that 0.01% on the matrix that I've worked out in my book works out on the average, which I think was about £36,000 a year in the UK. That worked out about £25-30 a month. Now, that's on a salary that you're probably getting around two to £2,500 take home a month. Are you going to miss 20-30 quid when collectively across just the UK alone, that's billions a year? Billions. There was something that I seen about a survey that was done, or you know, a census or something, that to help fight things like this, poverty stricken all over the world, it would be something like, I don't know, 5 billion or something like that per month or per year to be able to sustain all of the things that are wrong in the world, where people are starving or not getting medication, vaccinations, whatever. For the sake of 30 quid, you know, and if every country did that, that's billions in that pot. Now, that could be used for everything to sort, but just basic human rights, clean water, some form of food, even if it was porridge or wheat or rice, something that doesn't cost a vast amount of money. That could be absolutely, life-saving. Why are we not doing this? The other things, vaccines, basic vaccines. In the UK, we have vaccines when we're babies. We have vaccines, boosters when we're, coming into the age of toddler. Then we have our preschool vaccines and stuff like that. And that changes as diseases die off and, other diseases come in, such as COVID. We've now got the COVID vaccine, the same as the influenza jabs. But, in countries that are, say, in Africa or whatever, that suffer badly with malaria, why are they not being looked after? Why not be treated? That could all come from this funding pot that's minimal to everyone else. And like I said, it's worked out in a matrix where those that in the UK earn less than 21,000 aren't part of the scheme. But anybody that's over, so in every 2,000 or 3,000 pound increase in salary, I worked it out, you end up by another 0.01. And you're not going to miss it. For me, one of the taxes I hate the most is council tax, but because you just don't ever see any benefit from it, really. But if I had 25, 30 pound a month, not a week, taken out of my salary to go towards fighting and saving lives worldwide, is that not like the best thing ever? What else is there? So shelter. Shelter's different depending on the climate or the country that you're in, because some countries will be warmer, in the nighttime, and people wouldn't be as scared to succumb into the elements the same as in the UK, or other countries that are really, take a huge temperature drop at night and have, very obvious seasons where you could succumb to the elements. But, just like, let's just say it's a really hot country all year round, in hindsight, a hammock and just maybe a shelter to cover them from rain or something. I'm not talking about building mansions and things like that, but why are we not sorting these things? I talk about in the book that just down the road from me we've got an old school. Now this building is listed, which for anybody that doesn't know means it can't really be touched or bulldozed or anything like that. It's got to stay there. But this school needed to have regulatory improvements for asbestos, a once absolutely fundamental material to use in building, and then years later they've worked out that it's one of the most poisonous substances we can use, and that changed everything. So that's another example of what we knew then and what we know now after time that we've worked, found that asbestosis, or however you pronounce it, is something that you can get from ingesting this material, this product. And now this school's got it, and I think one of their basically the cost outweighed the necessity. So what they did was they just closed the building. It's boarded up. It's been boarded up. I've been up here where I am for 20 years, and it's been like it since. This school is huge. This building could house homeless from 50-mile radius of where I am, potentially more. It's very L-shaped, so you could literally have one side male, one side female, and you could literally have 3 or 4 wardens that worked 12-hour shifts, or 6 wardens, and pay them a salary. It would save the local governments and the central government millions in hotel fees and everything else that comes with fighting homelessness just in the UK. And the reason they don't is because they go, oh, well, under health and safety, they need to have this, and this. No, all they need is shelter. Because the biggest killer in the UK for homelessness is the fact that they haven't got any shelter and they succumb to the elements. Then you've got food and water intake. So why are we not able to supply 2 wings, male, female, with a load of bunk beds, possibly even in 3 tiers, a ladder going up the side? We could house thousands of people in there. But I digress rather. So, but that's another one of shelter. But why are we allowing these people to succumb to the elements when there's money there that nobody would really miss to go to a good cause? Why is that not law? Why is that not in place? Why even if it was in place tomorrow, why is it not being done 20 years ago? So that's that side of things. Then basic education. You can argue this one, but I believe that everybody should, be given the basics of, maths and English and things like that, because they are fundamental in life. But everyone should get the opportunity to be able to do it, and this could all be funded from this one pot, from losing £25-30 a week on the people that on the average salary in the UK and the same worldwide. Are you going to miss that? Why are these people dying? Why are these people not educated? Why are they not given basic healthcare and vaccinations? Clean drinking water. I mean, it's one of the things that winds me up the absolute most. I just don't understand why this basic thing cannot be sorted. Why we can't collectively as a global unity come together, pay minimal collectively where it's compulsory for everyone. And, I've always said that £1, when I'm doing charitable fundraising and stuff like that, £1 off of everyone is, in the UK is next to nothing. But collectively, that £1, if everybody in the UK, I can't remember what the last census was, but let's say it's between 60 and 80 million, the total population of the UK. If all of those gave £1, it's nothing. But collectively, that's £80 million. If you did that once a month, the money that you could make. But the only way to do it, because you're always going to have some people that are givers and other people that are like, no, charity starts at home. But both are fine. But when you think of the world collectively, we're all the same species. It doesn't matter what colour skin you are. It doesn't matter what gender you are, what religion you are, what country you're from. It makes no odds. This is, the semantics. It's irrelevant. But we could sort these problems out easily by just giving a little. And if it was made law in every country, even if there were some countries, the way that things currently stand now, that went, I'm not doing that. That's their problem. What about these wealthy countries like America, us, Russia, Japan, China, other parts of Europe that, have got the ability to be able to enforce this and, make it law, make it legislation. Just those countries alone would probably be able to battle this. And it would save lives. It winds me up and it really irritates me that can't be done, because I believe that these are the fundamental human rights of life, of our species. And I believe that it's the duty of all of us to do more. It's all great and wonderful doing a pound here, pound there. I'm in the same boat. I don't earn a lot of money. I'm not, I haven't got millions that I could do. I wish I did have. I can tell you exactly what I'd do if I won the lottery. And let's say I won £150 million on the Euro Millions. I reckon about 30 to 50 million of that, maximum, I could help those, myself and those that I love, close around me. Probably a lot less than that, because anything's better than nothing. But I'm not an ostentatious person. I don't care what clothes I wear or what cars I've got. I buy something if I think it's, the right price, affordable. But that 100 million spare, I swear to you on my life and my kids' lives and my whole family, my friends, my loved ones, that I would, and it wouldn't be given to somebody else. What I would do is I would physically go to a country, bring a building force with me, and put in, water pipes and whatever, build shelters, build educational facilities, just build. because that money, I don't need it. What do I need it for? So I can go on holiday every single week, one after another. It'll get boring. It would get boring. This is why so many celebrities and stuff that we see that are dying of overdoses and stuff like that, because they've got so much money they just go and spend it on stuff that they don't need. And to get that excitement in life, by doing something you shouldn't be doing. It's crazy the way that the world works. And a lot of these things that I discuss and I talk about in the book they're obvious to the majority of people that have, that just think. And why is it not, what frustrates me is not, I wish more people thought like me, but why there's not a larger amount of people trying to do something positive. I believe that we've all got a purpose in life, and I'm hoping that this is mine, that I can try, if my book or my podcast or whatever it is can change one life, it's worth it, right? So I have now, bordering 40, made it my life's mission during my remainder of time in life to do everything I can outside of politics to change politics, to change. I don't want people to have the same opinion as me. I want them to question me. I want them to challenge me. But I want them to think and have a thought process. That there's so much bad in the world, but there's also so much good. And, there are going to be other people out there that are like-minded, like me, that want to help and, do what they can, but they just don't know what direction to go, how to do it. I don't believe that going into politics would be the way to do it, because I believe that if your face doesn't fit, you'll end before you even begin. So if I was to go into politics and started going, I want to enforce this, all of them are going to think, oh my God, money, we won't get any votes, or, we can't do that. And that's the problem, is that all people care about, votes, money. And what we should be caring about is people dying. People dying through wars, people dying through lack of clean water, food, shelter, vaccinations. Our priorities are all wrong. And even if the people and those that are in power in any country know this or have morals about any of this, why are they not doing something about it? You're in the positions to do something about it. And what do you care more about? Just getting through your term, making your money, and making a name for yourself, good, bad, or indifferent. It just depends on how what you do and what the public think of you. And until you do it, you're not going to know. But there's always going to be for, and there's always going to be against. So why are we not doing things that matter? We could save lives, and you're going to get exactly the same results as you do with everything else that you decide to do. You're going to get one side over here, one side over here. One loves it, one doesn't. You're never going to get it 100% right. I reckon the best you could get in any government is maybe anywhere from 70 to 80% positive effectiveness. I don't think you'll ever get it higher than that. So if we know that, why are we not trying to do something better? But anyway, I digress again. So that's basically my thought process on the first question. And I know I said I wasn't going to go on, but I am a talker. I am passionate, which I hope you can see, about what I'm talking about, what I'm trying to achieve with the book, with this podcast, which is a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So to get no initial return from it, to be able to do anything that I'm trying to say about, during my spare time, because that's when I do all of this, it is disheartening. So, I am trying my absolute hardest, but I'm hoping that all proceeds from the majority of proceeds from the book, or anything that I might get from the podcast or anything else associated with 1 Opinion in 8 billion, that the majority of it will go towards good causes. So whilst I've got you, that's the book. It's a big book, okay? I am currently getting it done in a different size, and I've actually split the book as well into the questions and then everything else, which I'm hoping will be out soon, so it'll be more accessible. But you can get it on Amazon and all other major retailers, on Kindle, ebook and paperback. The new part 1 and part 2 will come in paperback and hardback, not ebook, because the ebook currently in the UK is only £1.99, and I think I get 85% of that, and then Amazon get the rest of it for doing it for me. With the paperback, it's 20 UK pounds. I think the print's around £13, so I actually only make £1.80 out of that. So very similar to what I make from the ebook. So I have lowered it as much as I can, whereas it looks like I haven't, but I only get £1.80, give or take, of that. So, and the book is big. I always describe it to people as it currently is, as when in the UK or around the world, when you're buying a pack of printing paper, A4 printing paper, it's basically like that. So it is huge. It is 500,000 words. It is fully referenced, and it's got a very large glossary in it. If you're like me, if there's a word that I don't understand or I've heard of, I have to go and look it up to know what it is. Even if you can get a rough idea through the context, I like to know what that word means. Not necessarily to use in the future in my vocabulary, but just to be fully understanding of what that word means and that full sentence means. So I have put a large glossary in the back as well. So my editor actually told me, which was quite funny, that this book is, like I said, 500,000 words. You say it in another way, 500,000 words, which is a lot. But he came back and told me that it's actually half of the original Harry Potter saga in terms of its words. So it is big. But I have organised the content so it's got page numbers. So every section of the book, every question in the book, every hypothesis, conspiracy is all written individually. So you don't have to read it cover to cover. You can literally open it, go, right, I'm going to look at politics. Look at one of the chapters in politics, find a question in politics, and read that, tick it off, and put it down. So it looks scarier than it actually is. But you can do it in bits. It wasn't designed to be read cover to cover. It was purely designed as a first of its kind non-fiction hybrid, where it's mixing political science, it's mixing science and physics, it's mixing conspiracy theories and deep thinking. There's so much that's in the book, and it is the first of its kind. It's completely unique in its distribution. And there was loads of people that said to me to do it originally in separate sections, part 1, part 2, or maybe even 3 sections. But I didn't want to, because there is a narrative that runs through all of it, as complete opposites that they are. There is a central narrative where basically everything that we see, everything we know, everything that we think we know is not necessarily the actual narrative. It's very much Chinese whispers. I talk a lot about, in media and politics alike, that there's a lot of manipulation out there. So for instance, when we're watching an advert, and I always use this one as an example, and I think I use it in the book as well, you got a washing powder advert. Let's say it's Dad or something like that, and they're like, here's the whitest of whites new washing powder. But 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, whatever it is, there was another one that had exactly the same gimmick. This is the whitest of whites. Well, white's white. I mean, how much whiter can it get? And what I always find odd is that they always keep the predecessor fabric, washing powder on the shelf. And why do they do this? So they can hike the price up of the new one. This is the best one. And they're planting a seed in your mind that you either have to run out and buy it, or that when you're shopping around and you see it, that you're like, oh, I've seen that on the advert the other day, I'm going to get that and try it out. It's manipulation. It's like, what's the other thing that I use as an example? Oh yeah, that's it. So, you're going, when you go to your supermarkets, what you'll find is that every now and then they'll do a switch around, okay? So let's say for 3 years, 5 years, whatever, you know you're a creature of habit, like we all are, and you go down each aisle, you grab all of the items that you normally get, and you might grab a couple of obscurities along the way, or special offers or whatever like that. But again, special offers, they're always normally right in your face, guaranteed a place where you will walk, so you see them, so you buy things that you don't necessarily go in there to buy, to increase how much you spend, to increase the profits of the shop, the superstore that you're in. But what they do is they'll move the aisles around. So, say in Tesco's in the UK, on aisle 10, they'll have cereals. They might move it to aisle 13 or aisle 7. Because what it does is it creates panic for you. So what you then have to do is go up and down every aisle like it's the first time you've ever been in there, because you don't know where anything is. And it's to break that behaviour. It's like behaviour modification. So, and then on that particular weekly or monthly shop, whatever it is, you're spending more and you're buying half the stuff that you didn't even go in there for, just because you're walking past it. And that's how manipulation works. And between the government telling us on the news or in statements or whatever it might be, whatever direction they're going in or whatever it is they're discussing about, it's irrelevant. How do we know that they're not just saying what they're saying? Because it's what they want us to hear. Because that is what they're telling us. They're not telling us anything dark or gloomy that we don't want to hear. They're telling us exactly what they want us to hear. And the media is the perfect front to be able to maximise on that, because it will just, somebody will say something and it'll, boom. Today, it will just go absolutely viral all over the world. Most people will know about it. And obviously, the bigger the event, the more people will know about it. And it's crazy, absolutely crazy. And even like myself, I know these things are happening, but I'll still go into a shop knowing that I'm being manipulated, without sort of blatantly being told I'm being manipulated, and buy the stuff that I don't need. And we all do. We're all creatures of habit, and psychology and stuff like that. The human brain is absolutely fascinating, and we barely know anything about it. I think we know like 5% about how our brain actually works and the function of our brain, across any study or science or educational facility. But I could be wrong on that. Don't quote me. But I'm sure it's a very low number. Very similar to the amount of space that we've explored and the oceans we've explored. I think the ocean we've only explored about. Oh, that's a low number as well. I'd have to look it up. But space, I think, is only 2% of what we can see. So, in terms of explanation and what we do know, in some of the major things of life, it's actually quite minimal. But yeah, so I digress again. So the next question I want to talk about is in chapter 2, Law, Crime and Justice, is trial by jury. Is it still effective? Does it still work? Did it ever work? So the jury system is, normally, around 10, 12 people, called your peers, that will hear evidence from prosecution and defence to either prosecute someone or business versus the defence team that are trying to get them off of that. Now, the problem with this is, forget if the crimes took place for a minute. What you're doing is you've got two people or two parties that are essentially trying to manipulate or persuade, whether they've got the evidence or not, it's irrelevant at this point. What they're doing, they're trying to convince these 10, 12 people that they're right. Either the prosecution or the defence. But you can have people that are guilty get off, and vice versa, people that are not guilty, that are found guilty, all because of the person they've got backing them. Now that often comes down to money. So, there's a lot of talk all the time about celebrities or people, quite high up, the elites, that often get away with stuff. Not always, but a lot. If it's blatant evidence against it, then you can't argue with CCTV and stuff. Well, maybe today with AI, but I digress again. So what I'm trying to say is that I talk about in the book about should there be, I don't know how you'd do it. This one would be a proper thinker, but a cap. So everyone's entitled to, the better lawyers or the better defence attorneys, whatever it is. It would be a tricky one to do that because obviously that's how they can charge so much because they're known for winning or, a lot. And obviously the ones on the opposite end are used to losing. So they charge about £1 an hour. But, all they're doing, it's irrelevant of everything else. What they're doing is they're taking what evidence they have or what evidence they believe they have and putting it for or against, depending on prosecution and defence, and trying to convince these peers of right or wrongdoing. So does it work? On the majority of cases, yeah, it does. But does that mean that it's effective for even a minute amount where it doesn't work? Where there's innocent people found guilty just because the opposing side had a good, was a better attorney, lawyer, whatever you want to call them. So the problem I have, and I can only base this mainly on the UK, I'm sure America actually have the two lawyers, or one side of the lawyers, be able to pick their jury members, which I think's absurd. I'm sure there's probably more to it than that, but for me that's nuts. It should be completely random. But random aside, I believe that they should be people of some form of stature. Now, that's not to say that somebody that hasn't got a degree isn't a good enough person to be a jury member. But there are people out there, let's say that that a random 18, 19-year-old in the UK is selected to be a jury member on a high-profile case, something really, you're going to have to be able to take in a lot of complex information in order to sway which way you're going to go. Let's say that they smoke a lot of cannabis. So most of the time they're, just not really with it, so to speak. Are they a good person to have? If you're somebody that's generally on trial for something and you haven't done something, in your head you're going to be thinking, God, these people, because in the UK all you've got to be is over 18 with no criminal record. So you could have anybody. You could have somebody that will say, let's say that they were a racist. Let's use this as an example. So let's say that it's a African American on trial, and we know that they haven't done it. But let's just say that the jury member is white Caucasian, and that they don't like black people, because there are unfortunately people out there that don't. Are they going to just go guilty? How is that right? So the fact of the matter is that you couldn't then say, right, okay, well, all the jury needs to be African American, and if it's a male person, that they've all got to be men. That's not the way to do it. But you need to have a vast and diverse mix. So people of all different religions, people of all different backgrounds, colours, skin, cultures, whatever. Because most countries now are multi-diverse. So it wouldn't be hard to find them. I'm not saying that when they do the selection, they have to go, 4 Asian people, 4 African Americans, 4 Caucasian. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that the selection should be, more often than not, there is a good mix of male and female, the genders. But it needs to be a good variety mix of qualified people. And when I say qualified people, I mean professionals that do have degrees. To give structure and to give some sort of, I don't know, just so it's not just biased, biased stance. In some crimes you'd hear the crime, and you'd automatically go in with a biasness because it's natural, human behaviour to go in, look at the person, stereotype, and go, oh yeah, he looks the sort, or she looks the sort. You haven't even heard anything. All you've heard is the crime. And so for me, trial by jury, it does work on the majority, but it needs tweaking. It needs tweaking. You can't, I don't know the full ins and outs of it, but you should have to be drug tested, breathalyzed, things like that when you're going into the court to make sure that you're of sound mind. That should be a winner for me. If you're somebody that suffers from mental health, it would depend on what mental health you suffered with. And it's not about being, not being equal opportunities and all of that. It's not about being discriminative. It's about the fact that there's a man or woman or whatever on trial, and you could potentially put them, to prison or whatever, purely because of a medication mix-up. This is where I think it needs tweaking, and with a lot of things, again in the UK and worldwide, a lot of laws need tweaking. So like everyone's going on at the moment about people coming over in the boats and the boats and the boats. Their anger is misdirected. If you lived in a country where it was war, poor, dictatorship, whatever it is, and you could go in a boat to another country neighbouring and go and get everything, wouldn't you do it? I would. That's what they're doing. They come over here for a better life. Does that mean they're horrible? No. Does it mean that they're all criminals? No. The problem is the UK government laws state that once they're basically on our soil, our land, across our borders, they're our responsibility. That's fine, that's great, but they should be fully vetted, which I'm sure a lot of vetting goes on. But there should be just one-liners in legislation that states that if you come to the UK, definitely through illegal means, that, you're not entitled to any benefits for, 3-5 years, whatever it is. Places like Australia and America have got it right. They have you've got proper hurdles to jump over to get into, to be able to go and even temporarily work or live in that country, outside of just a visitation visa for holidays. But Australia is part of the UK's Commonwealth, and it ain't easy to get over there. You need to have like a professional qualification or experience in a particular field. You need to have money back in. You have to have sponsors. There's so many different things, and that's what we should have. That's all we need to change. Little tweaks, nothing major. But going back to what I said about the people coming over in the boats and everyone going moaning about it, yeah, it is an issue. It is an issue. But we shouldn't be angry at them. They're just trying to create salvation for themselves. We should be angry at the government. They're allowing it to happen. That's why they're coming over, because we allow it. And I'm not saying that we should have a big wall up like Trump does with Mexico and America and whatever he's doing over there. What I'm saying is that the law just needs changing. That if you've come over through illegal means, yeah, you'd be dealt with fairly and, not treated badly or anything like that. Or you're just trying to, have a better life. But, they get deported. If it's a war zone, then you've got asylum seeking, or you've got other things that you can go into and stuff like that. But, there's just there's just so many things that could be so easily sorted. And I don't know why the people that are in charge, haven't, well, no, because they do know it. These people that are in charge, they're not all stupid. I'm a nobody. I just pay attention. That's what I do. So I pay attention and I formulate my opinions. Whether they're right or wrong, is actually irrelevant. But the fact of the matter is, I analyse and I look at it and I think, why? I'm like, if which in retrospect is probably right down here in terms of intelligence that I'm, talking about, that we're in power. why are that? What, you know, they obviously must know. So why are these things not being dealt with or done? You know, why are they, you know, thinking about raising taxes and, you know, in the UK, what's one of the ones that come in that they're taxing pensioners' pension money, which is just, I don't even know how that they can come up with things like that, because the pensioners, the pension that they're receiving, they've already paid tax on, and it's comical. It's comical. I discuss all the time about what is it? The budget every year. So every time we hear the British budget, they'll go through the list of all the areas where things are increasing through inflation. So this has gone up by 3%, this has gone up by 4%, you know, 2.5%, 2.6%, whatever it is. And then they'll come to wages. I've gone up by a third or maybe half if we're lucky of everything else. So what that means is that everything's gone up by, say, let's say 4%. Wages have gone up by 1.5%. Well, we're still 2.5% worse off than the year before. It just doesn't make sense. How is there not? I'm not calling for people to rebel and to be far right or anything like that, even though I'd probably be known as far right because I'm saying something against the government, God forbid. But you know, freedom of speech, it does exist. And as long as you're not being derogatory and you're not being a racist or insulting or anything like that about it. Yeah, so as long as you're not being derogatory or offensive or discriminative or anything like that, you know, there's nothing wrong with you going up to someone, say African American, and talking about the slave trade, which is an absolute huge stain on humanity. It's one of very few that is just something that should just be, it should just be erased. Well, it shouldn't be erased because it happened and it was completely wrong. But I just wish it's something that never happened. It's awful. You know, any Jews that have been mistreated during the time of ancient Egypt or World War II with Hitler. I mean, all of these things to me are just absolute stains. But I digress again. So if you were to talk to an African American about the slave trade, you know, there's nothing wrong with you talking about that. It's not a taboo subject. You know, it happened. It was awful. You know, but as soon as you get a racist talking about it to an African American, if that was to ever happen, it's gonna go bad. And it's not going bad because you're having any different conversation than, you know, the one having a sort of an educational conversation. It's going to go bad because they're going to be derogatory, discriminative, offensive. What they're wanting to do is cause harm, pain, hurt in the opposing party. And it's going to go only one way. So that's where things get blurred. You know, freedom of speech is fine as long as you're not talking about something in an offensive or hurtful manner. If you're talking about it in an educational, a philosophical, or, you know, curious point of view, the conversation is never going to go bad because you're caring, you're understanding. But as soon as you're derogatory or offensive, you know, anything like that, it's going to go only one way. And that's, to me, what a far right is. So if I was sitting here now, saying, call to Britain, we should all rebel, we should all not go to work, we should all protest, we all need to do it, then yeah, that's not going to be great. But I'm not. What I'm saying is that, you know, healthy protest, the difference between activism and terrorism isn't the end result, it's the way you're going about it. You know, activists will protest and they'll tie themselves to trees or, you know, whatever it is, and they'll protest outside government buildings and stuff like that. If you're doing it calmly and peacefully, you've got a right to be heard. Terrorists want to do it quick. They feel like they've not been able to get anywhere, even if they've started as activists or protesting and it hasn't worked. They've gone, you know what, we'll go and kill a load of people and be heard. Well, that's not the right way neither. But the fact of the matter is, you know, a lot of this discussion that I've done today, and I have digressed loads, is basically, we just need to change the way that we think. We need to change the way that we do things. Now, you're always going to get people that are bad. They're just bad people. Whether, they've had a bad childhood, whether or not they're just an angry person, you're always going to get people that are negative. And that's just unfortunate. You're always going to get it. That's just an animal instinct inside any mammal. But going back to these people on the boats and people saying that they're rapists and killers and, sex offenders and they're just, they're so misinformed because, yeah, some of them might be. But so's Joe, Caucasian, Christian from, British born from down the road. There's good and bad in every culture. There's good and bad in humanity. There's good and bad in every, gender, skin colour, sexual orientation, anything, religion, call it what you will. There's just so many people that are misinformed. And again, this is another problem with the media. The media, I digress again, and I'm gonna stop it after this one because I have gone on, and I'm probably driving you all nuts. But this is my passion, and I'll pick up on another podcast the other questions. But what was I going to say then? I talk so much, I completely lose track of what I'm even talking about. Right, so I remembered what I was going to talk about now. So we're back. So it was basically about 9/11. So post 9/11, I was only in my, I think I was about 14, 15 when 9/11 happened. But when it happened, obviously everything just went haywire and it was an awful time, etc., etc. But the point I'm trying to make is that that's when I noticed that it was depicted that basically every Muslim is a terrorist, which is just crazy because the two biggest religions in the world is Catholicism and Islam. To say just because it happened to be people that were, of the Islam religion, Muslims, that, committed these crimes, does that mean that the whole race or the whole people that believe in the Quran are terrorists? No. And, but that's all you hear. Little digs here and there, media, social media. And what happens is it corrupts people's minds and it becomes the norm. And that's where all of our people are misinformed. All Muslims are not terrorists. And if you think that, you really need to give your head a wobble. Big wobble. It's like saying that during another stain, especially in UK's history, of when the IRA were very much in force in Ireland. It was almost like a civil war between two of the kingdoms. It's crazy, but after the Irish War, you didn't have everyone sort of saying that either all Irish people or all Catholics were terrorists, which is it's no different than saying it with 9/11. Post 9/11, there's wars that have been fought more so than probably any other religious wise, but you can't label everyone the same of a particular culture, country, colour of skin, religion. It's crazy, and I don't even know how the media gets away with it because it's essentially mass slander. And yeah, I'm gonna wind this episode down for today because I've gone on and on and on and on, and it's not turned out. It's not turned out at all how I wanted. I literally wanted to come on, say a quick hello, and talk about the 5 questions, and I've done 2, and even that was, up and down. But that's why this podcast, and I wrote the book in the first place to leave on a final note. I promise I'm going. When you're having a discussion with someone and it's a difference of an opinion, even if it's a healthy conversation and it's not being argumentative, it can still get heated to a degree because of passion. And the way I explain it to people is that very similar to how I've talked just to you guys. I've been talking about one thing, and then it's brought up another point, so I've branched off, and that's how it happens in a debate or argument, is that it branches off, and nobody actually really gets their full point across because they've just gone all over the place like a brainstorm. So when I wrote the book, I was able to reflect. God knows how many times I listened to the book during the editing phase. But fortunately, I'm a taxi driver in my main job. So what I was able to do was write my sections, write my questions, write my answers, whatever it was. And I'd put it on my iPad in the car, and I'd have Word read it back to me. So all I'd hear, my customers, some of them where they were happy for me to play it, were probably like, what? And it's just a computer talking my thoughts, which was quite surreal. But I was able to, anything that I felt that I went a bit off, or they didn't need to be in there, it was just blah, blah, blah. I made a note of, and then when I went back to my computer, the next time I had free time, I would edit, make the edits, rather, because I do suffer with dyslexia, so for me to read the book thousands of times would have been quite difficult, and took a lot longer to be able to publish it than it did. So that's what I'm going to leave you on a final thought. I'm just going to stop it there. I'm not going to say any more. And I will pick up on the other 3 questions that I didn't get through today on the next podcast I do of similar standing. So I really thank, any of you that are listening, I do really appreciate it, from the bottom of my heart, because this is very difficult for me to do. I'm one of the most confident people that are out there, but to talk to you, essentially talking to yourself, to a camera, trying to make it enticing for others is very, very difficult. And I am finding the algorithms very hard to overcome. But I am a doer, so I will continue. But again, any of those that do listen, that do enjoy, maybe not agree with everything, but certainly understand where I'm coming from. I really, really appreciate it. And any of you that do want to go on and buy the book, you're massive, you'll be helping me and helping others, somewhere at some point. And any of you that do that, if you could leave me reviews on any social media platform, give me a tag or a mention, and reviews on Amazon to help me build up my where you get noticed. They'll suggest it more. Getting up through the ranks, I'd really appreciate it. I'm only looking for honest feedback. I'm not looking for people to go slagging me off. I'm not looking for people to kiss my bum. I'm looking for honest feedback. I want to reach people's internal self, and hopefully the people that are watching this are like-minded people like myself. Might share different views or opinions, but they generally want to do good, because we need to stop thinking about today, and we need to start thinking about tomorrow, and we need to do that probably 20, 30 years ago or more. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next one, guys. Bye.
Thanks for watching the One Opinion in 8 Billion podcast. The truth is rarely simple, but the questions are always worth asking. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and join the conversation, because the biggest questions in life deserve to be explored.